Johnny Blaze's Harley Panhead from Ghost Rider. Flames, skulls, that insane transformation sequence. You think you know this demonic motorcycle, right? Wrong. Because behind that flaming chrome and hellfire lies a story that will blow your mind. We're talking about custom fabrication nightmares, impossible engineering challenges, and production secrets that the studio kept hidden for years. From the number of bikes destroyed during filming to the bizarre method they used to create those iconic flame effects, these 20 weird facts will change everything you thought you knew about the most badass motorcycle in cinema history. Let's ride. Fact 20. 9 completely different bikes were built.
That cartoon?
Here's something that'll shock you. The production team didn't just build one Harley Panhead for Ghost Rider. They built 9 completely different motorcycles, and each one served a specific purpose that you never noticed on screen. The Hero bike, which appeared in close-up shots, was a fully functional 1946 Harley-Davidson Panhead that cost over $50,000 to build and was the only one actually capable of being ridden at high speeds. But here's where it gets weird. They built 3 stunt bikes specifically designed to be crashed and destroyed, 2 bikes that were just static props for dialogue scenes, 1 bike that was nothing but a rolling chassis for tow shots, and 2 partial bikes that existed only as front ends for close-up transformation sequences. The most insane part? They built 1 bike that was completely made of rubber and foam for scenes where Nicolas Cage had to fall off or interact with the motorcycle in ways that could cause injury. Each bike was slightly different in weight, handling characteristics, and construction materials, which meant the stunt coordinators had to meticulously plan which bike would be used for every single shot in the film. The production spent over $400,000 just on building and maintaining these motorcycles throughout the shoot. Fact 19. The forks were mounted backwards on purpose. Now this is going to mess with your head. If you look closely at Johnny Blaze's Panhead, you'll notice something seriously wrong with the front end. The Springer forks are mounted backwards compared to a traditional Harley-Davidson setup, and this wasn't a mistake or a continuity error. The production designer deliberately reversed the fork configuration to create a more aggressive, predatory stance that would make the bike look demonic even before the transformation sequence kicked in. Traditional Springer forks angle forward to provide better shock absorption, but mounting them backwards created this menacing, almost insect-like appearance that subconsciously unsettled viewers. But here's the crazy part about this decision. Mounting the forks backwards made the bike incredibly unstable at speeds above 30 miles per hour, which meant stunt riders had to completely relearn how to handle the motorcycle because everything about its steering geometry was fundamentally wrong. The reversed forks caused the front wheel to wobble unpredictably during hard braking, and 3 stunt riders refused to work with the bike after test runs because they considered it too dangerous. The solution? They installed a hidden hydraulic steering damper inside the triple tree that cost $12,000 and had to be custom machined in Germany. This damper prevented the death wobble but added 32 pounds to the front end, which then required the entire frame to be reinforced with additional gussets. Fact 18, it ran on race fuel that cost $90 per gallon. Hold on, because this fact is absolutely bonkers. Johnny Blaze's Panhead couldn't run on regular pump gas or even premium octane. The engine required a specialized racing fuel that cost $90 per gallon and had to be specially ordered and transported in hazardous materials containers. The reason for this insane fuel requirement goes back to the engine modifications that were made to create that distinctive sound you hear in the film. The production team bored out the original 74 cubic inch Panhead engine to 127 cubic inches, installed high compression pistons that created a 14.5:1 compression ratio, and fitted it with a custom camshaft that had so much overlap, it made the engine virtually impossible to tune for street use. But here's where this gets really stupid. That compression ratio was so extreme that regular gasoline would pre-detonate and destroy the engine within minutes of running. The race fuel they used was VP Racing C16, which has an octane rating of 117 and contains lead compounds that are illegal for street use in the United States. Every time they started the bike for a take, it would cost approximately $45 in fuel, and because the engine was so inefficient with this setup, it only got about 4 miles per gallon. During the production, they went through over 800 gallons of this specialized fuel, which means they spent roughly $72,000 just on gasoline for a motorcycle that appeared on screen for less than 15 minutes of total runtime. Fact 17. The seat was made from actual alligator hide. Get this, that badass leather seat Johnny Blaze sits on throughout the film isn't regular cowhide or synthetic material. It's genuine American alligator hide that was specially tanned and treated to create that distinctive texture you see in close-up shots. The production designer wanted something that looked ancient and dangerous, so they sourced the alligator leather from a supplier in Louisiana who normally provides exotic hides for high-end furniture makers. But here's the weird part. Alligator leather is incredibly sensitive to heat, and the practical flame effects used during filming would have destroyed it instantly. The solution? They created two completely different seats. The hero seat used real alligator hide for normal riding scenes, while a duplicate seat made from fire-resistant Kevlar composite material, painted to match, was swapped in whenever flames were involved. Each alligator hide seat cost $3,200 to fabricate, and they made 4 of them throughout production because Nicolas Cage kept accidentally tearing the leather with his costume's metal studs during mounting sequences. Fact 16. The handlebars heated up to 200 degrees. This is absolutely insane. During the practical fire effect sequences, the chrome handlebars on Johnny's Panhead would heat up to over 200 degrees Fahrenheit within seconds. The production used real burning gasoline and propane to create the initial flame effects before switching to CGI enhancement, which meant metal components on the bike conducted heat at dangerous levels. Nicolas Cage couldn't actually touch the handlebars during these shots without getting severely burned. So the special effects team developed custom heat-resistant gloves that looked like regular motorcycle gloves on camera, but contained 3 layers of Nomex fire-resistant material and aluminum heat shields. But here's what makes this totally crazy. Between takes, the crew had to spray the handlebars with liquid nitrogen to cool them down fast enough to maintain the shooting schedule. This thermal shock caused the chrome plating to crack and peel after just 3 flame takes, which meant they had to completely rechrome the handlebars 6 times during production at a cost of $800 per rechroming session. Fact 15. It weighed exactly 666 pounds. Now this is either the most brilliant detail or the most ridiculous coincidence in film history. When the final hero bike was completed and weighed, it came in at exactly 666 pounds. And before you say that's just a lucky accident, multiple crew members have confirmed that the production designer deliberately added and removed components during the build process to hit that specific weight target as a reference to the demonic number of the beast. They added a custom steel subframe reinforcement, switched from aluminum to steel for certain brackets, and even changed the battery to a heavier lead-acid unit instead of a lighter lithium-ion battery. But here's the kicker about this obsessive attention to detail. That exact weight made the bike handle like an absolute pig during stunt sequences. The extra mass made it nearly impossible to perform tight turns at speed, and stunt coordinators complained constantly that the bike felt sluggish and unresponsive. The solution? They built separate lightweight stunt bikes that weighed only 480 pounds, but kept the 666 detail for promotional materials and making of documentaries. Fact 14. The chain was replaced after every single stunt. Here's something that'll blow your mind. The drive chain on Johnny Blaze's Panhead had to be completely replaced after every single major stunt sequence, and we're talking about 47 chain replacements throughout the entire production. The reason for this constant maintenance goes back to the insane torque output from that modified engine. The Panhead was producing over 200 foot-pounds of torque, which was double what the original chain was designed to handle. Every time stunt riders did a burnout or hard acceleration, the chain would stretch beyond factory specifications and develop weak points that could snap during the next take. But here's where this gets really expensive. Each replacement chain wasn't a standard Harley part. They used custom-made chains from Renthal that were designed for motocross racing and cost $650 per chain. The production went through over $30,000 in chains alone. Even crazier? They had a dedicated chain specialist on set whose only job was monitoring chain tension and wear between takes. Fact 13. Nicolas Cage actually burned his hand during filming. This story is legendary among the stunt crew, During a supposedly safe dialogue scene where Johnny is just sitting on the bike, Nicolas Cage suffered second-degree burns on his left palm. What happened was a complete failure of communication between departments. The special effects team had just finished a flame test on the bike 30 minutes earlier, and while they'd cooled down most components, they forgot about the clutch lever. That lever was solid brass underneath the chrome plating, and brass retains heat for an incredibly long time. When Cage grabbed it for the take, the metal was still sitting at 140 degrees Fahrenheit. But here's what makes this story even crazier. Cage didn't stop the take. He finished the entire scene while his hand was literally blistering, and only after the director called cut did he calmly inform the crew that he'd been burned. The incident shut down production for 3 days while his hand healed, and from that point forward, every metal surface on the bike had to be temperature checked with an infrared thermometer before any actor touched it. Fact 12. The front tire was solid rubber with no air. Now this is going to sound absolutely ridiculous, but the front tire on the Hero bike wasn't actually pneumatic. It was a solid rubber tire with no air inside whatsoever. The reason for this bizarre choice was purely about reliability during the transformation effects. The production team was terrified that the intense heat from the practical fire effects would cause a pneumatic tire to explode on camera, potentially injuring actors or crew members. So they commissioned a specialty tire company in Ohio to create a solid rubber tire that looked identical to a period-correct Firestone tire, but was actually carved from a single piece of synthetic rubber compound. But here's the trade-off that made everyone miserable. That solid tire weighed 63 pounds, compared to a normal tire's 18 pounds, and it transmitted every single bump and vibration directly into the frame. Stunt riders complained that riding the bike felt like being on a jackhammer, and several riders developed repetitive stress injuries in their wrists from the constant vibration during long filming days. Fact 11. The exhaust pipes were ceramic coated 7 times. Listen to this madness. Those gleaming chrome exhaust pipes on Johnny's Panhead aren't actually chrome at all. They're ceramic coated with a specialized thermal barrier coating that was applied 7 separate times to achieve the mirror finish you see on screen. Each layer of ceramic coating had to cure for 72 hours in a specialized oven before the next layer could be applied, which meant the exhaust fabrication process alone took 3 weeks per set of pipes. The reason for this insane coating process? The practical flame effects would reach temperatures of 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt traditional chrome plating in seconds. But here's the truly stupid part about this entire situation. Even with 7 layers of ceramic coating, the pipes were still discolored and damaged after just 2 flame takes. The production went through 18 complete sets of exhaust pipes during filming, and each set cost $4,200 to fabricate. That's over $75,000 spent just on exhaust pipes that kept getting destroyed by fire effects. Fact 10. The speedometer was deliberately installed backwards. This detail is so subtle that 99% of viewers never noticed it. But the speedometer on Johnny's Panhead runs counterclockwise instead of the normal clockwise direction. The production designer made this choice as a visual metaphor for Johnny's cursed existence, representing how his life as Ghost Rider runs contrary to normal human experience. But implementing this seemingly simple detail turned into an engineering nightmare. They couldn't just flip a regular speedometer because the internal mechanism wouldn't work in reverse. So they had to commission a custom gauge from a company in Switzerland that manufactures precision instruments for experimental aircraft. But here's where this gets completely out of control. That custom backward speedometer cost $11,000 and took 4 months to manufacture. Even more ridiculous? It didn't actually work. The mechanism was purely cosmetic because the bike's modified engine created so much electromagnetic interference that it scrambled any electronic gauges. So they paid $11,000 for a backward speedometer that was just a static prop that never displayed accurate speed readings during any scene. Fact 9. The fuel tank held only 1.2 gallons. Get ready for this absolutely bizarre design choice. Johnny Blaze's Panhead has a fuel tank that holds a pathetic 1.2 gallons of fuel, which is less than half the capacity of a standard Harley-Davidson Panhead tank. The reason for this tiny capacity was purely aesthetic. The production designer wanted an elongated, stretched tank design that looked more aggressive and demonic, but stretching the tank meant reducing its depth to maintain the proper visual proportions. The result was a tank so shallow that it could barely hold enough of that $90 per gallon race fuel to run the engine for 20 minutes. But here's the logistical nightmare this created on set. They had to station a fuel truck within 50 feet of every shooting location because the bike needed constant refueling between takes. During the desert highway chase sequence, they burned through 43 gallons of race fuel over 2 days of shooting, which meant refueling the bike literally dozens of times. The production hired a dedicated fuel handler whose entire job was running back and forth with fuel cans. Fact 8. The skull ornament was cast from a real human skull. This is going to creep you out. That menacing skull ornament mounted on the front of Johnny's panhead wasn't designed by an artist or sculpted from clay. It was cast directly from an actual human skull that the production designer purchased from a medical supply company. The production team wanted absolute anatomical accuracy for the demonic aesthetic, so they used a real human skull as the master pattern for creating molds. But here's where this story gets legitimately disturbing. The skull they used belonged to a 19th century mental asylum patient, complete with documented trepanation holes drilled into the cranium. Those holes are actually visible in extreme close-ups if you know where to look. The production designer thought these surgical modifications added to the cursed, tortured aesthetic of Ghost Rider's motorcycle. But here's the controversy that almost derailed everything. When word leaked to the press that they were using a real human skull, several religious groups protested the production, calling it desecration. The studio had to issue a statement clarifying that the actual skull wasn't used on the bike, only as a casting reference. Fact 7. It required 2 people to start the engine. Here's a fact that'll make you appreciate modern motorcycles. Johnny Blaze's Panhead was so mechanically complicated that it required 2 people working simultaneously just to start the engine for filming. One person had to operate the kickstarter while another person manually adjusted the carburetor mixture and controlled the manual advanced timing lever. The heavily modified engine had such radical camshaft timing and compression that it would backfire violently if the timing wasn't perfect during startup. But here's what made this process absolutely maddening for the crew. On cold mornings, the engine could take up to 47 kicks to fire up, and remember, this is using that expensive race fuel at $90 per gallon. Each failed start attempt wasted approximately $2 in fuel that just flooded out the carburetor. During production, they calculated that they spent over $6,000 in wasted fuel just from failed starting attempts. Even worse, the violent backfires during starting broke 3 Kickstarter mechanisms throughout filming, requiring emergency fabrication of replacement parts. Fact 6. The frame cracked during the first stunt test. Now, this is the kind of production disaster that almost killed the entire movie. During the very first high-speed stunt test, before any actual filming began, the motorcycle's frame cracked completely in half at the neck junction. The stunt rider was traveling at 75 miles per hour when he felt the front end start wobbling uncontrollably. He managed to lay the bike down safely, but when mechanics inspected the damage, they found a 6-inch crack in the frame's main backbone. The problem? All those modifications and added weight had created stress points that the original 1946 Harley frame simply couldn't handle. But here's how they solved this catastrophic problem. They hired a master fabricator who specialized in vintage motorcycle racing to completely re-engineer the frame using modern chromoly steel tubing while maintaining the original appearance. This emergency redesign cost $68,000 and delayed production by 3 weeks. Every subsequent bike built for the movie used this reinforced frame design, essentially making them custom motorcycles that just looked like panheads. Fact 5. The leather grips came from a 70-year-old baseball glove. This story is absolutely wild. The leather handlebar grips that Nicolas Cage grabs throughout the film weren't purchased from any motorcycle parts supplier or custom fabricated by the props department. They were cut and stitched from a vintage 1937 baseball catcher's mitt that the production designer found at an estate sale in Vermont. The designer wanted leather that looked genuinely aged and weathered, with a patina that couldn't be faked through artificial aging techniques. That 70-year-old baseball glove had the perfect worn texture, complete with natural oils, sweat stains, and creases that told a story of decades of use. But here's the insane part about using this vintage sports equipment. The leather was so old and dried out that it kept cracking and splitting during filming whenever Cage gripped the handlebars with any real force. The props department had to treat the grips with a specialized leather conditioner made from mink oil and beeswax before every single take. Even with constant conditioning, they went through 4 complete sets of grips during production. The production designer had to scour antique shops and online auctions to find 3 more vintage baseball gloves from the same era to harvest enough leather. Those 4 vintage baseball gloves cost a combined $3,800, which means they spent almost $4 grand on handlebar grips made from sports memorabilia that most collectors would have kept in pristine condition. Fact 4. The headlight glass was made from bulletproof material. Get ready for this ridiculous safety measure. The headlight lens on Johnny's Panhead wasn't regular glass or even standard acrylic plastic. It was bulletproof polycarbonate material that's normally used in armored vehicles and bank teller windows. The reason for this extreme material choice was the production's insurance company freaking out about the flame effects. They were terrified that the intense heat would shatter a regular glass lens and send shrapnel flying into actors' faces or expensive camera equipment. So they mandated that every component within 2 feet of the flame effects had to be either fireproof or shatterproof. But here's where this requirement became completely absurd. That bulletproof polycarbonate lens costs $2,400 per unit and had to be custom molded to fit the vintage headlight housing. Even more ridiculous? The material was so thick and impact resistant that it actually reduced light output by 40% compared to regular glass. The cinematographer complained constantly that the headlight wasn't bright enough for night scenes, so they had to install a secondary hidden LED light behind the polycarbonate just to get adequate illumination. They essentially paid $2,400 for a bulletproof lens that made the headlight dimmer, then spent another $800 on additional lighting to compensate for that dimness. Fact 3. The bike's sound was actually 3 different motorcycles mixed together. Now this is going to shatter your perception of movie magic. That distinctive rumbling growl you hear when Johnny rides the Panhead isn't actually the sound of that specific motorcycle. It's a carefully engineered audio blend of 3 completely different motorcycles recorded separately and mixed together in post-production. The sound designers recorded the actual Panhead engine, but found it sounded too thin and underwhelming for a demonic motorcycle. So they layered in the exhaust note from a 1954 Vincent Black Shadow, which provided that deep, throaty bass rumble and added high-frequency crackle from a modern Ducati superbike to create mechanical aggression. But here's the truly insane attention to detail in this audio construction. The sound team spent 6 weeks in the studio manipulating these 3 recordings, adjusting pitch, timing, and harmonic frequencies to create a sound that felt supernatural yet mechanically believable. They even added subsonic frequencies below 20 Hz that humans can't consciously hear but can feel as chest vibrations in theaters with proper sound systems. The final sound mix contained over 140 separate audio layers for various RPM ranges, acceleration patterns, and environmental acoustics. That iconic Panhead sound that seems so simple and raw actually represents thousands of hours of sophisticated audio engineering work that cost the production over $90,000. Fact 2. The paint required 18 coats and cost $14,000. Hold on to your helmet, because this paint job story is absolutely bonkers. That glossy black finish on Johnny Blaze's Panhead isn't a simple rattle can job or even a standard custom paint process. It's an 18-layer paint system that took 11 days to complete and cost $14,000 per bike. The production designer demanded a black so deep and reflective that it would look almost liquid on camera, capable of showing perfect reflections of the flames during transformation sequences. Each of those 18 coats had to be hand-sanded with progressively finer grits of sandpaper, from 400 grit all the way up to 3,000 grit, before the next layer could be applied. But here's where this became a production nightmare. That mirror-perfect finish was so delicate that even touching the paint with bare hands would leave permanent fingerprint etchings in the surface. The crew had to wear white cotton gloves whenever they moved or positioned the bike, and between every take, a detailer had to spend 15 minutes carefully wiping down all surfaces with microfiber cloths. During one particularly disastrous day of filming, a crew member accidentally leaned against the fuel tank and left a permanent elbow print that required stripping and repainting the entire tank. That single mistake cost the production 48 hours of downtime and $9,000 in emergency paint work. The production spent over $126,000 total on paint and paint-related repairs across all 9 motorcycles. Fact 1. Only one original bike still exists, and it's in a private collection. Here's the heartbreaking truth that most Ghost Rider fans don't know. Of those 9 meticulously crafted motorcycles built for the film, only one still exists in its complete original form. After production wrapped, the studio destroyed 6 of the bikes because they were too damaged from stunts and fire effects to be worth restoring. 2 bikes were stripped for parts to keep the hero bike running during reshoots. That single surviving hero bike was supposed to go to the Peterson Automotive Museum in Los Angeles, but a private collector intervened with an offer that the studio couldn't refuse. But here's the controversy that still makes fans angry today. That anonymous collector paid $1.7 million for the bike and immediately locked it away in a climate-controlled vault where nobody can see it. Multiple motorcycle museums have offered to display the bike with proper credit to the owner, but every request has been denied. The collector's identity has never been publicly confirmed, though rumors persist that it's either Nicolas Cage himself or a wealthy Middle Eastern oil magnate. What makes this situation even more frustrating is that the studio never bothered documenting the exact specifications and modifications made to the bikes, so recreating an accurate replica is virtually impossible. That means the most iconic motorcycle in modern cinema history exists somewhere in a private vault, unseen by the fans who made Ghost Rider a cult classic and may never be publicly displayed again. And there you have it, 20 insane facts about Johnny Blaze's legendary Panhead that'll change how you watch Ghost Rider forever. Smash that like button, subscribe for more movie vehicle deep dives, and drop a comment telling us which fact absolutely blew your mind. Thanks for riding along with us.